Who came down into his roof from the sky? The Blessed Virgin Mary and St. Michael drove out the demons. They never came back. The guy's like 80 some years old, lives in St. Louis, Missouri. He's got a family of 6. He's never been possessed again.
Well, hello there, Gracious Gang. Welcome to the Gracious Guest Show. I'm your humble host, Mike Creavey, here with you once again on this adventure through all things theology, faith and culture, spiritual warfare, which is the topic of this particular show, and everything in between. This is a one-stop shop for all kinds of different conversations, discussions, presentations on the faith. I'm really delighted you've joined us today. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do that. You're going to get all the great content that's coming out, and you'll be able to, help this mission along by sharing, hopefully, with your friends, with your family, anyone you think might benefit from this conversation today. I'm delighted today to welcome back to the Gracious Guest Show Dr. Dan Schneider and Jesse Romero, both of whom have been on the program before, just in the last year or so, talking about different aspects of spiritual warfare, which is, again, the topic today. Now they've been teaming up in recent times now to collaborate on this wonderful book from TAN that I don't have a copy of, a physical copy, but I have it on the Kindle, but it's called Spiritual Warfare Q&A. You got to check that out. That's one of the links below. Basically, they're here to talk about this book and also their combined experience in different ways dealing with issues of spiritual warfare, the necessity for people to really be aware of that and really take seriously the spiritual combat that we find ourselves in. Dr. Dan Schneider is an adjunct professor of theology at Franciscan University of Steubenville and a faculty member of the Maryvale Institute in Birmingham, England. He has a degree in business administration from the University of Notre Dame, a master's degree in theology from the Franciscan University of Steubenville, and a doctorate in biblical studies from Liverpool Hope University. Dan is a former amateur boxer, U.S. Army Cobra helicopter pilot, and Gulf War veteran, and has worked for many years in the Catholic Apostolate of Deliverance and Exorcism, both at the diocesan level with Father Chad Ripperger, whose name is also very well known in the world of exorcism. Dan is the author of the Liber Christo Method, a field manual for spiritual combat, published by TAN Books. Jesse is a full-time bilingual Catholic lay evangelist with a BA from Mount St. Mary's University in Los Angeles and MA in Catholic theology from Franciscan University as well. I have to be a little biased here because Franciscan is, of course, my alma mater. So kudos to these gentlemen for picking a wonderful school. Jesse's a bilingual Catholic author who's a recipient of the Archbishop Fulton Sheen Award for Doctrinal Clarity as a speaker, Fullness of Truth Defender of Faith Award. He speaks on all things related to Catholic evangelization, apologetics, marriage, family. Jesse's also a boxer, worked in law enforcement for many, many years and brings that very awesome experience and what he saw through that experience as well in terms of spiritual warfare into all these conversations as well. So I am delighted. Enough from me. Let's get right into this awesome interview, this conversation with Dr. Dan Schneider and Jesse Romero on all things spiritual warfare, demonic affliction, occult doorways into these sorts of things, exorcism, everything in between. Let's check it out. Well, I'm excited to welcome back Dr. Dan Schneider and Jesse Romero. Both of you guys have been on the program before, and you were on not too far apart from each other, and I don't think at the time I realized that you guys have this collaboration going on, so welcome back together here. This is exciting.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I appreciate you having us on.
I like to hold up now. Usually, I'm a print book guy. That's my favorite. But once in a while, I just have the convenience of the Kindle. So this is my Kindle, which doesn't really maybe look impressive to people, except it's Van Gogh's Starry Night. But in here is this great book that you guys have collaborated on here, Spiritual Warfare Q&A. And why don't you just maybe tell us a little bit about yourselves? Each of you. We'll maybe start with you, Dan, just because you're in my screen. You're next to me here, and then you guys can share a little bit however you'd like about the genesis of this project.
Yeah, so I work, I'm an adjunct professor of theology at Franciscan University, and also work as a doctoral researchers at St. Mary's University in London. Academically, that's kind of my professional background. I've written the Liber Christo manual. I wrote in conjunction with Father Ripperger as part of the work I work doing with Father Ripperger in cases of possession, obsession, etc., diabolic affliction. Also, for the last 10 years or so, worked cases locally as well. So Jesse and I linked up about 5-6 years ago. We've known each other probably 20 years, and we kind of reconnected over some training we were doing not long ago, or I think it was before COVID. And we started from that time, said, hey, let's put together a question and answer book. We wanted to do the old what was the title of that book, Jesse? Radio Replies, because we have a podcast together, and we're getting ready to start a new apostolate together, Holy League Institute. Jesse can tell you about that. But we want to, so we're just kind of, we field between the two of us hundreds of questions, it seems, a week. And so we just kind of put these questions together, couldn't quite snag the name Radio Replies, so we just did Spiritual Warfare Q&A. And these questions are coming both from laity and it's for priest and laity. The last two chapters are questions that I've fielded. I do a lot of training, a decent amount of training and consultation with exorcists and priests. And so these are the questions that come in that priests, quite frankly, aren't getting. They're not getting this in seminary. So we put some of the theology in there and answering the questions that come in from priests. How can they engage as priests in the spiritual combat as well, and for the protection of their flock?
Sure. Jesse, how about you?
I came into this work through one of my brothers, a year and a half older than me, was diabolically afflicted when he was probably about the age of 20 till about the age of 22, 23. A Catholic priest came in about once a week to pray over him. And I was tasked with holding him down, me and my two other brothers and my sister and my mom and dad. And so some of the things that I saw at the age of 19, I can't unsee because I saw this in my own brother. I was also a cop in Los Angeles for a little over 20 years. And Los Angeles County is the occult capital of the world because of Hollywood, because you have actual chapels dedicated to Satan in Los Angeles County. There's a lot of witchcraft, a lot of Satanism, a lot of occult, a lot of New Age. And so I was seeing this day in and day out, working in Los Angeles and living out there as well. I also assisted 3 different priests. 2 of them were graduates from the Mundelein Pope Leo XIII Seminary. They were graduates from there, and they had ministries out in Los Angeles. I would help them out. And a 3rd priest that I also helped out, he was a graduate from the AIE, that's in Rome. He was trained in Rome as an exorcist. So I've been around this for about 20 years. And I reconnected with Dan in 2019 as I was taking some additional training that Dan was giving, actually. He was one of the instructors, and I went over to Colorado. We reconnected, and we started talking about the fact that we've been answering questions on spiritual warfare for years, and we just put our notes together and said, well, let's come out with a book and try to help the lay faithful and help out the Catholic priests as well.
Yeah. Well, it's so necessary. And that's, I'm just in my own, my own life. I'm in my 40s now. So like I was coming up in my faith, really for the first time on my own. I always like the phrase I heard from somebody years ago, like when that phase when you have the opportunity to buy your own faith instead of renting your parents,
right.
Which I love that image. And that was, in my 20s at Catholic U in Washington, D.C. And part of that was this kind of, in those next few years, an awareness of the reality of spiritual warfare. I heard some crazy stories and, read Father Amorth's book and all this kind of stuff. And then years later, the Rite, the movie came out with Anthony Hopkins, which was loosely based on the book that Father, or the account of Father Gary Thomas and that kind of thing. So I'm coming up myself on probably 20 years now of at least awareness of some of these, the categories of obsession and possession and some of these things. And now I have the opportunity to tactfully, at the age range I'm teaching, mostly freshmen, to occasionally in the year, at least, bring up some of these issues with them as far as, helping them to be careful, about what they're doing, like what they're engaging in at parties and whatever the case is. And I'll just give you one quick example, and then I got a question for you on this. I had a kid like 2 years ago, I'm talking about this. Very sincere kid. He's a good kid, but he comes up to me after class and like I said, I didn't get super specific or any, really scary content per se, but he starts telling me it was just he's like, yeah, I was at this party last week and this girl was like doing like this love potion and love spell. And he's telling me about this. He's like, do you think I should like talk to Father, about that? And I'm like, yeah, would be a bad idea, and so, and not to, make him scared, but just to say, listen, there's always healing, there's always hope, but let's not, let's nip this in the bud now before this gets worse. So just to the listeners and viewers, I want to kind of preface all of our conversation with, this isn't like, abstract theory. Like this stuff is happening. Your grandchildren, your children, or their friends
and
dabbling in this stuff today.
Yeah, and Mike, you're not talking about some huge public school student. You're not teaching at a a 3,000 student school in downtown Chicago. This is a Catholic school. Yeah. So our
rural Pennsylvania.
Exactly. So our kids, if those kids are being exposed to it, imagine what's happening across the country, at some of the urban areas in Southern California, for example. I mean, there's witch forums on TikTok. I mean, these kids are being exposed to it. They're being exposed to it in a very, very young age, and they're trying to normalize it. The old saying is that the devil hides in plain sight, and he started to hide in plain sight. We see Tucker Carlson talking about evil. Sean Ryan, who I was on with Sean about a month ago. Sean Ryan is you have secular guys, good men, secular guys, talking about this stuff in the secular media, and we find ourselves, and some of our own religious leaders aren't talking about evil. They're talking about things that most of the lay Catholics are like, really? It's like when you and I were in combat, the enemy's inside the wire. We're taking shells and we're getting hammered, right? And there's a threat of getting overrun. And the commander comes in and says, "Hey, I want a locker inspection. Make sure everybody's got their boots shined." I'm like, "Sir, we're getting overrun here. Overrun. So maybe we ought to engage." So I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just saying that the world is waking up to it, and the church has been a little slow, and they're afraid. They don't know what to say, because we've taken a generation of priests and laity, and we've not catechized them on the reality of evil. And so we go into our seminaries. Very few, if any, seminary teaches angelology, cosmology, sacerdotal theology based on the tradition. I was just talking to a guy that's a seminarian, and I just sent him a paper that I wrote and presented on EWTN in the UK on the royal priesthood, on the Triumuna of the priesthood, and he had no idea what the Triumuna was, because they're not getting that in seminary. And so trying to educate. So what we're trying to do with this book is just to try to put some Catholic principles behind it, so people can go, "Oh, okay, there's principles to combat, and we need to start applying them."
Yeah. Well, let me ask you. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jesse. Yeah.
You also see satanic activity and witchcraft. It is just so prevalent right now. You'll see that, for example, Lucian Greaves, who's like the Pope of the Temple of Satan, he says that abortion is a religiously protected satanic ritual. So they admit that abortion is a satanic ritual. You also have many city council, many government forums where they'll have invocations. Satanists are now being invited to give invocations in many state capitals. You also have, when Donald Trump was running for president, you have this organization called Witches Against Trump. Witches were casting spells against President Trump. You also had another organization said Witches for Kamala Harris. You have after-school Satan clubs that are growing across the country, where students are being indoctrinated with satanic dogma by giving kids coloring books and babysitting them until their parents pick them up. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Walmart, you can pick up a satanic Bible from those locations, satanic coloring books, satanic books on spells. You have the Super Bowl. Oftentimes, it's just peppered with satanic, halftime shows, satanic entertainment, satanic insignias.
Was that the Grammys a few years ago with Sam Smith and the whole like running around dressed like the devil?
Exactly. You got remember and Travis Scott. And you remember at the Astro World in Houston, Texas, where he was doing some satanic conference. It had all kinds of satanic imagery around, and 8 people were killed. Again, like you said, the Emmy Awards, the Grammy Awards. These are people with the approval of the Academy of Motion Pictures. They're pushing Satanism and witchcraft and sorcery right in our face. They're not even hiding this. Super Bowl halftime shows. They erect satanic statues around the country. They erect baby satanic nativity scenes in state capitals next to Catholic public nativity scenes. Let me tell you, this is the gloves are off This is a knife fight at this point between Christianity and the occult.
Well, what would you guys say? So, like, if somebody's watching this just to play, oddly enough, to play devil's advocate, if I can use that phrase, someone who, to be fair, someone might hear this and say, well, that's, a bunch of superstitious nonsense. It's just, it's candles and, incense and like I'm checking out at the grocery store the other day. This goes to what Jesse's saying about mainstreaming it. And there's People magazine with whatever's going on, whatever they want me to care about with Meghan and Harry now. And right next to it, a whole magazine about witchcraft and witches, and like it's right there. I turn it around or hide it every chance I get. But for someone who might say, this is just a bunch of personal little fun, that kind of thing. Why don't you guys just walk us through a little bit? Someone who might not really be aware some of the theology of this, like what is behind this, and the reality of the angelic and the demonic and the nature. Maybe it's a big question. The nature of the reality that the spiritual and material realms that God created interact in fact on a daily basis. That these are real realities.
The Catechism says that Catechism 409, all of human history has been one of dour combat with the forces of evil, going back to the beginning of time to the present day. That each of us must fight for our own salvation, our own perseverance. We must persevere in this battle. In the old rite of confirmation, some bishops still do it in the new ritual. There was this slap, right? But while you were confirmed, there's the Kali slap. It harkens back to the medieval knights, reminding that you are now entering into the church militant. Mike, when you and I were in combat, Jesse, when you were in urban combat with as a police officer, you put that uniform on. You can't turn and run. You are bound. You are there to stay and fight. A civilian can turn and leave at any time they want. A soldier, a cop, you are now part of the team that you have to stay and battle. And so we've lost this concept. We lost the concept of a real evil, the concept of a personal devil. It's just this construct to explain the evil that's among us. That's simply false. The church affirms the fact that the devil is a real person. Demons are real. Demons are fallen angels. Demons were created. Angels were created good, and demons became evil at the rejection of their divine mission. This is all Catholic doctrine. And so what you see is everything the devil does, the devil cannot create anything. Only God can create. He is the creator, right, of all things visible and invisible. But the demon can do is distort. And so there's different types of curses operant, but they are just the inversion of everything the demon does is just an inversion, a copy of the Catholic Church and the truths revealed in the Catholic faith. And so they have their own rituals, just as we have rituals. They use objects, just as every ritual that we perform, that the Catholics perform. The ultimate rituals are the 7 rituals of the sacraments. There's solemn words, and then there's symbolic rituals and actions. The solemn words, pronouncing baptism, and then there's rituals, reenactment, right? And there's matter being used, and that matter, that inanimate matter, becomes agency for God's divinity, for His grace, for His power. And so the demon distorts that, and they have their own sacramental system. They have their own curses. They also have solemn words and ritual reenactment, and they also use objects and inanimate objects that convey their own diabolic power. So Psalm 96:5, the gods of the Gentiles are demons. Last week, I think it was Friday's Mass, it says, we sacrificed to demons. And so these rituals, this was from Baruch, why punishment was coming upon Jerusalem for the apostasy and falling into false gods. So who are these? If the gods of the Gentiles are demons, if they're sacrificing to demons, when you make these ritualistic sacrifice, we call them curses. When we do our sacramentals and sacraments, they're technically blessings. Even the rite of exorcism is a sacramental. It's a form of blessing, and objectively speaking. And so curses just work in the very opposite. Now there are human curses. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, or you cut somebody off in traffic and they curse you. There's no agency. There's no preternatural activity or invocation in that. But preternatural curses work in a diabolic inversion of the true, the good, and the perfect, everything the Catholic Church puts out.
the only thing that I would add to that, Mike, is that all the three monotheistic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which make the bulk of people on planet Earth, when you put all three religions together, they all believe in angels and demons. That's part of the deposit of faith of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, which again, that makes the lion's share of most people on planet Earth. They're one of those three. And so this has always been believed everywhere up until modern times, when we got to the whole notion of atheism and modernism and secular humanism, and we just kind of began poo-pooing things that we cannot see. Again, the fact of the matter is, you even have entire shows that are dedicated to this. Hollywood's made a cottage industry because this is so real. You got like 20 sci-fi series, paranormal series, this series, that series, the Ghost Hunters. This is so obvious right now that Hollywood has even made entire shows that play every day on going to haunted houses and communicating with these fallen spirits. We as Catholics have believed for this in 2,000 years, but you're not going to fight these ancient demons with cameras and cell phones and microphones. You have to fight them with the ancient enemy weapons of the Catholic Church, which are prayers, the sacraments, and sacramentals.
It's funny, you guys talk about this in the book too at one point, like one example, which a lot of people would maybe, again, like, poo-poo or forget or just not be aware of. But you talk about Gregorian chant, and like these things that it's not to make light of it, but I love, and like a lot of these exorcist testimonies that I hear, like, the Exorcist Files podcast is so popular, like kind of doing these dramatic recreations from Father Carlos Martin's, work. But this routine thing that I've seen in a lot of publications, including yours, about, I don't know what else to call it, but the kind of the pettiness, the pettiness of the demons, which were made to be, angels. They were made to be these wonderful, glorious beings that rejected all this glory that God gave them for whatever their own particular hang-up that they attached themselves to was, And so I've heard some exorcists saying, I think Monsignor Rossetti was telling me this one, where he was in an exorcism where the demon got really upset about him pronouncing its name wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's almost kind of funny to the extent of like this, like to get so, but it makes sense if they are what the church teaches they are, that they've basically become the sin that they attach themselves to, rather than what they were made for, this glorious thing they were made for. And so it makes sense to me that something that's so simple, maybe in the church's life, like the beauty of Gregorian chant, would really drive them crazy. So I thought I'd ask you guys about that, or if there's anything other like that you want to share. And I have a follow-up maybe I'll come back to, but I'll leave it there for now. So maybe in your own experience, or just maybe tell a little bit about that aspect of it, the Latin.
Yeah, I've seen working cases, again, hands-on, day in, day out, sometimes 2, 3, 4 sessions a week. It's like, I don't know if you ever wrestled, Jesse, your kid, you guys are a wrestling family. You wrestle or you box the same guy over and over again. You get to know him. You get to know his moves. You get to know his smells. You get to know his instincts. And so when you're going in session week in and week out, you get to know the demon. He gets to know you. But demons have a vulnerability to Gregorian chant. One particular story and again, the demon reacts to the chant, and I've never seen a demon react to Jesus culture, right? To praise and worship music. That's not the same. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? It's not the same. There's a difference, because again, it's from the heart of the church. Electric guitars and yeah. So one particular case, and again, I can give you the theology of it, but I'll just give you a true case history. We had a case where the priest exorcist said this particular demon did not want to engage, and he was being very resistant. So the priest told me to light it up. So I took out some music, and I took Gregorian chant, and I played the Te Deum, and the Te Deum from the Santo Domingo, the monks of Santo Domingo de los Silos, and the demon immediately manifested. The following week, immediately flopped on the floor in a full-blown manifestation just by because the Te Deum is the chant of the angelic choirs before the throne of God. And in that, what you're projecting into the cosmos when that is being played is this is where you were meant to be. You were meant to sit before the throne of God and wonder and awe and beauty and be filled with this majesty for eternity. And now you're reduced to this.
This
is now your throne. So then the next week he said, do it again. And I found the Dies Irae, which is the day of wrath.
Yes.
And I thought,
Gregory
this is
the Great, I think, right?
Yeah. So me being a smart guy, I got a PhD. I'm going to outsmart. I'm going to really stick it to him this week, right? So I play the Dies Irae, and the demon looks at me and just kind of smirks and just nods his head. Not going to happen. And, the entire day. And so I looked, and I could not figure it out. And then I looked at the two sources. The first one, monks, Santo Domingo de los Silos, monks chanting from the heart of the church as part being recorded in chant. And if you read like Dionysius, the Areopagite, how the celestial choirs find a shadow reflection in the ecclesial choirs. And then the monks in chant are praising before God and echoing the choirs of angels. And there are 9 choirs of orders and the 9 choirs of hierarchies of angels. And all this is like a spider doing a push-up on a mirror. That's what's being projected in the cosmos. And the meaning and liturgical meaning, all that is being sounded. The Dies Irae that I played, that I looked at it, and that was the Westminster Lay Choir. It was just well-tuned, good vocal singers they took choir and chorus in college, and they were very well instructed, and their pitch was perfect, and they were saying the same words, but it wasn't from the heart of the church.
Wow.
One created a reaction, the second did not. This is why Jesse says we fight an ancient enemy and ancient weapons are best. So it isn't the words. If that was the case, we just play Jesus culture. Lord, I lift your name on high and get the guitars out. That's not what it is. The demon is reacting to the authority and the authoritas, authority of the church itself, herself. And the heart of the church is the monastic life.
That, real quick, because that was kind of my follow-up, because one thing that crossed my mind is I love chant, I look it up all the time, but what comes up a lot these days, and it sometimes is good enough that it tricks me a little bit, but usually I can figure it out, is AI. Right, like AI generated chat. And I was curious about that because I wonder, my assumption would be it wouldn't have the same effect either because it's a machine producing it. It's not the human voice, especially the consecrated human voice, right? Maybe singing it. Yeah, wow, that's fascinating.
And it's that consecrated the consecrated virginity, those voices. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the Latin language is sacred.
Yeah.
Because that what you're going to say, Jess?
Yeah, go ahead. Go with it.
The Latin language is sacred. And this is why the demon I've seen the demon mock the Latin language, the Greek language, and the Hebrew language are the 3 sacred languages because they were affixed to the cross. Jesus Christ, King of the King of the Jews, right?
That was I was going to ask. That was in the book. Yeah, yep.
Right. So those are the sacred languages. The demon reacts to that. He knows that. He traffics in that, and he knows that this is also the Latin language is the language of the church, the official language of the church, and so he will. I've almost every exorcist I know has terrible Latin, and I've been in session with them, except for Father Ripperger, whose Latin is good, but most exorcists have not studied Latin that well, and they get mocked every time. I've had my Hebrew corrected. Not me doing it, but during the session, I gave some points to the exorcist, not talking points, but a battle plan, and I made a few references in Hebrew. My Hebrew was not wasn't correct, and it was corrected in session. The demon knows these things.
Well, what's so creepy is you're dealing with an entity. That's the thing. It's not a literary device. You're dealing with an individual, personal entity that is literally way older than Hebrew. This thing, it doesn't know the language like we would maybe study it and learn it now. It knows it, in a way we can't possibly
the nuances.
Intellectually.
And the nuances of the language. I mean, and he knows every language, records his mission, every language that ever was, records it to his mission, he knows, infused perfectly.
The only thing that I would add is that, as Father Ripperger says, that demons are lawyers from hell, and being in and out of courts for over 20 years as a cop, the language of the courtroom, from the judge to the prosecutor to the defense attorneys, is Latin. Everything's spoken in the courtroom, habeas corpus, voir dire, writ of certiorari, all these terms I heard all the time going in and out of courts. It's Latin. They translate it into English, but it comes from Latin. Demons know when they start hearing Latin, especially Latin chanted. Remember, he who sings praise twice, St. Augustine. When you start chanting this language, demons understand this is prosecutorial language.
Sure.
It's legal language, and they know it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they, and this actually, you mentioned, I think, Dan, you brought up authority, or both of you guys have mentioned it, and I did, that was on my list, my bucket list of things I wanted to bring up, because you get into this, and this is a topic in previous interviews, I've talked to some exorcists, and this is something I always ask them about. What are some of the things from your guys' perspective that are really important for people to realize here? Because I think, to tee it up a little bit, I think it seems to me so significant to take this seriously, where, like, me as a father, for example, it's so easy in the secular mindset to just have no awareness of, in the spiritual order of things, how not just significant, but uniquely significant my authority is over my kids than anybody else, and all over my spouse too, which I maybe a sidebar with that, because you guys talk about that as well, the nature of the one flesh union, you know, that imprecatory ability that I have that, you know, no one else might, because of my wife being my wife. That was maybe some of that is really interesting to share here with folks.
Let me just preface while let Dan jump. There's been this ambiguity that's been taught in the Catholic Church ever since the 60s when it comes to power and authority. And you'll find most Catholic models of healing and deliverance, they basically borrow the Protestant Pentecostal model. Mm-hmm. Remember, Protestants don't have a priesthood.
Right.
And so their notion of priest is everybody's a priest.
Sure.
They have a collapsed notion of priesthood, where we as Catholics, and this is the big issue, we have the ministerial priesthood, that's the clergy, the ordained, we call it holy orders, mm-hmm. and then we got the priesthood of the laity. And so although both of us draw our power from Christ, there's a difference in degree and essence. And this is what a lot of Catholics, they borrow the Protestant model, and here's where they get in trouble. Dan, you want to jump in?
Right. So we have to make a distinction. So in the Protestant models that have been largely used in the Catholic Church for the last 20, 30 years through the charismatic renewal, collapses power and authority. And in a popular book on deliverance, the author says power is authority, and that's just simply not true. Mm-hmm. When Jesus sends out the apostles on Luke chapter 9, Luke says, and Jesus sent them with power and authority. They're two different things. Power is the ability to affect change. Power is extrinsic. The power of the Most High will come upon you, right? The angel Gabriel says to the Virgin Mary, and the power for healing came upon Jesus. Okay, power is something extrinsic. It is the ability to affect a change. Authority is intrinsic. It's based on one's office in relation to the person and place of the object. This is right out of Scripture, but embedded in Scripture, but fleshed out in tradition. And St. Thomas makes that very clear. So authority, it comes through office. And so the office gives you the right to command. And so if you don't have the right to command, you have to be very careful and trying to drive out demons. And so even the gesture of laying hands is a priestly gesture and a patriarchal gesture. That's why we go into that in the book. And this is the reason that Father Gabriel Amorth, you mentioned him, Father Winston Kabading, chief exorcist of the Philippines, Father Dan Rehill, my friend, Monsignor Rossetti, you mentioned Monsignor Pope, who's the one from Indianapolis you mentioned? I forget.
Father Lampert.
Yep. And Father Ripperger. You're talking about guys that have various degrees of background, various degrees of theology, not all trad like Father Ripperger. All of those men are experienced exorcists, and they all say that lay people should not be imposing hands on other lay people outside of the authority structure within the home. So that's the priestly gesture. It's a gesture of blessing in the home, and so it needs to work within that. And Benedict XVI, in one of his homilies in 2010, in the year of the priest, if you remember, he links the authority to the munera, the tria munera, or the munus, the office of the priesthood, the threefold office of the priesthood. It's right there in the catechism. The office of preaching or teaching, the office of healing, the pastoral liturgical office, and the office of ruling, right? And so what in that office of ruling, he links it to Jesus' words to Peter at the Sea of Tiberias. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Feed my lambs, tend my sheep. Feed, tend. So provide and protect. Those are the two ends of the authority structure. When you have an office, whether it's head of household or a priest or bishop or the Pope himself, you have an obligation. The munus is an obligation and a responsibility to provide and to protect. And so if you work in spiritual combat within the authority structure, you will work within provision and protection. If you step outside of that, you could expose yourself to retaliation. This is one of the rules that we've tried to flesh out in the book to make it clear. So this is how we can safely engage in spiritual combat as lay people and as priests.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that, of course, is what that might look like on the ground. One of the notes I had was just you guys get into a little bit of different devotionals and sacramentals, and I love also the authority charts. You have all these different appendices too. This thing is it's you can tell a lot of time went into this too over the years, and your guys' collective wisdom. Why don't you talk a little bit about maybe what you've seen in your own forms of ministry, anything that you've participated with is from maybe like the lay side here when it comes to devotion sacramentals, especially for somebody who might be suspecting or for sure dealing with some sort of maybe demonic affliction or within their family, maybe for their kids, something like that. What are some things you guys, have seen that are particularly powerful in that fight?
The most powerful thing, Mike, is for to get a lay Catholic who's obviously diabolically afflicted, steeped in mortal sin, ignorant of the Catholic faith. You'll find people that live in mortal sin are generally not poorly catechized. They're not well formed in their moral conscience. And so as a result of that, what we try to do is get lay Catholics and take them from an unclean state. Remember, evil spirits are called, demons are called unclean spirits 21 times in the New Testament, unclean spirits. Unclean spirits are attracted to unclean people. What does that mean, unclean? Okay. It means a person who's living separated from God in mortal sin. And so what we're trying to do with this book is we're trying to get people, give them the right information so they move from a life of uncleanliness or mortal sin into a life of cleanliness or sanctifying grace. We're trying to make them from the prodigal son of the pig pen to get them home to the Father's house. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And it's spade work. It's not easy. This is not witchcraft. You don't go on Wednesday nights to, Karen from parish council in the basement who lays hands on you and speaks in tongues, supposedly. That's witchcraft. That's superstitious.
It's very superstitious.
Spiritual warfare.
It can be.
Cleaning yourself up. It's like this, Mike. How easy is it to get out of shape? Easy. How easy is it to get in shape? Difficult. It's the same way in the interior life. How easy is it to invite a demon into your life? Easy. One mortal sin, one unconfessed, unrepentant mortal sin opens the door to a demon. How hard is it to drive it away? It's spade work. You're going to get on your knees. You're going to be pulling weeds. And this is what we're trying to teach people. It's time to, as Dan says, it's a smash mouth Catholicism. Yeah, this is pound and ground. This is UFC Catholicism. It's no pain, no gain. This is not some magic little pill. You go to, Susan from Parish Council on Tuesdays at her house and she lays hands on you. That's just not true. That's like an aspirin. That's like giving you a Tylenol for a headache. You may have some temporary relief because somebody kind of loved on you and prayed over you, but that's not going to drive the demon out. We got to teach people to go from a life of mortal sin to a life of sanctifying grace. And the Bible is very, very clear. In 1 John 3:10, you got children of the devil and you got children of God. We're trying to help the children of the devil come back into the fold of the children of God using the tools of the Catholic Church, faith, prayer, and the sacraments.
Now,
yeah, what we find too, Mike, is and experience working with cases of diabolic affliction, and the protocol that we allude to here in the book. But that the demon responds to the imposition of order as much as to the prayers themselves. So part of that order is getting order, the right authority structure and order in the home, but also a physical discipline, a life order to prayer. You know, I had a guy email me and said he did the protocol, which is a 30-day. He did it for Lent, but we have a 6, 12, and 6. You do set prayers, you do a media fast, and you're praying the Angelus and a couple other prayers throughout the day. It's not nearly as strict as Exodus 90. I just did St. Michael's Lent. This is actually harder. I mean, Michael's Lent is actually harder, but St. Michael's Lent actually. But what happens is people do the Exodus 90, and they start getting in shape. They start getting their life together, and once they quit, it all comes right back. That's the danger.
Real quick, I had a buddy in college, one of my ROTC friends at the time. He really got into he was working out like crazy, and he was doing all these like supplemental protein shakes. And then he stopped the working out, kept doing the protein shakes. He gained a lot of weight in a very short amount of time.
Exactly.
But you got to keep it going. Yes,
you got to keep it going. So imposition of order. So I get this email from this guy. He said he struggled with pornography and alcohol abuse since his 20s. He was in his 40s. He was abused as a teenager, he said. And he said he did a discipline for Lent. He said, and my whole life I've struggled with pornography addiction and binging with alcohol. And he said, after about a month, it lifted. He said, I have turned the corner on these temptations. He said, and I realized it was two things. It was a lack of discipline, he said, and a poor catechesis. It was just ignorance, you know. And so the discipline is absolutely important. The good old fashioned ordering the life to prayer, getting up at set times. I had a priest consult with me about earlier this year, and there was a seminarian in his diocese that was getting ready to leave the seminary because he couldn't overcome a sexual addiction, a pornography addiction. And so the priest as a spiritual director, he said, "Hey, let's take him on." I said, "Roger that, I'm in." So we take this kid and we put him on a strict regimen. And we said, "Look, you can do Exodus 90 or you can do the Liber Christo protocol." And Exodus 90, cold showers, you know what I mean? I mean, it's a lot stricter. He goes, "All right, I'll do that. Whatever you guys are saying, it's a lot easier." Okay. So he does ours. At about the 6 week, this guy was getting ready to leave the seminary. At the 6 week mark, it lifts. Now we put an additional layering over that because of seminary of tapping him into the divine office, doing the full office. After about 6 weeks, it lifts, and he was liberated, and now he's back in seminary. Thanks be to God. So we talk about the ancient weapons. These are the ancient weapons. Saint Cyprian, 300 A.D. Here's what he says: in time of great persecution, let us commend ourselves to fasting, vigils, and prayers in common. These are our weapons, our heavenly armaments for combat. And what do we want? We want to do this. I just want a quick fix. I want to go over and get prayed over and feel better about myself. And the demon just, you can punch a demon in the mouth and you can get a manifestation. But there's a difference between a manifestation and extraction and a liberation. And so we're talking about lasting, long-term liberation and reconciliation with the Father. And that just takes, like Jess says, spade work.
Isn't that amazing how like so many, I was just talking to a student about this earlier in a different context where he was expressing, common concern about, why do I need to go to church each week when I can just pray to God on my own? And of course, I was explaining to him how a lot of that comes out of this more Protestant mentality. I'm not knocking our Protestant brothers and sisters, but it is part and parcel of that tradition to emphasize, the personal relationship with Jesus, which of course is a must. Like we should, lean into that as much as possible, but not at the expense of the corporate reality of the body gathering. Because what I said to this kid was, look, why do you think it's just about you and your own personal experience of Jesus? Maybe we benefit from you being with us on Sunday, as part of the body gathered together. And what I immediately thought of with this was it's the same thing I hear in so many of these exorcism cases where, you got this belligerent demon who's really hanging on, and all of a sudden, like, St. Dominic Savio comes to the party, or St. Rose of Lima, or, St. Therese, or whoever, this idea of how just panicked these ancient primordial spiritual big scary creatures, right, become of a simple French nun. Or,
they're vulnerable to those saints specifically, those that defeated him in the flesh. They're vulnerable to those in particular. The mystics,
and that's real. The relics,
the
right? The relics.
Yeah, the stigmatists. Yeah.
Mike, that's an important point that a lot of Protestants, they overlook. We call that the communion of saints. In the Old Testament, the Jews are called God's celestial choir in heaven. In other words, God is surrounded. God's not alone by himself. He has saints and angels around him, and they're not unemployed. They're not playing, on the internet or something, just, preoccupied with themselves. They are actively, because they're in Christ, they're actively have knowledge of what's going on upon the earth, and they pray for us. We see that in Scripture as well. And as Catholics, there's a meme, which is a heresy that Protestants are always putting out on the internet. It's got our Lord Jesus Christ and the devil, they're hand wrestling.
Oh yeah.
As if it's yin and yang, as if they're counter,
like huge muscles, right.
It's
like, I always think of the scene that was a Predator, right? When
Arnold and
Schwarzenegger. It's yeah.
I'll tell you why that's heresy, because Jesus Christ is God incarnate, all powerful, present everywhere. He knows everything. And the devil is a fallen creature. So the devil is not our Lord's nemesis. If our Lord has it, if the devil has a nemesis, exorcists say it would be Saint Michael.
Yeah.
The Blessed Virgin Mary, not Jesus. Jesus is supernatural. The devil's preternatural. So the devil's nemesis would be a saint, either Saint Michael the Archangel, the Blessed Virgin Mary. And again, it goes to show you that our Lord, when somebody's possessed here upon the earth, our Lord, because he does have a celestial choir in heaven or communion of saints, he'll send a saint or an angel to do his light work. In other words, you think God is going to stoop down to come down to drive out a demon from this mental institution, from this priest who's doing an exorcism? No. God says, hey, Mom, somebody's possessed over in Kentucky. Can you take care of it? Yes, I'll be right back. Yeah. Hey, St. John Bosco, can you take, hey, Padre Pio, can you go take care of this possession?
Philomena, like whoever, yeah.
Yeah. God sends his celestial choir. For example, the famous case that gave us the movie The Exorcist.
Yeah.
God didn't come down and drive the demon out. If you read the book and watch the movie and read the transcripts, it was at the end, the priest kept telling the boy, the day you say Domino, which means Lord in Latin, God is going to set you free. He's going to deliver you. And he couldn't say it. He's finding the mental institution. He says, Domino. And what does the boy say? Who came down into his roof from the sky? The Blessed Virgin Mary and Saint Michael drove out the demons. They never came back. The guy's like 80 some years old, lives in St. Louis, Missouri. He's got a family of 6. He's never been possessed again. God didn't come down and drive the demons out. He says, hey, Michael, go take care of it. Mom, can you take care of it? Yeah, no problem, son. I'll be right back. God's not going to stoop down he sends his celestial court to do his bidding.
Yeah, and what's interesting is again, you're dealing with cases year in and year out, time in and time out. You see that God, it isn't just random. I'm going to send Saint Benedict on this one. There's a reason that the special charisms, when you pray the litany of saints, or the priest is praying it during the session, you'll see the demon will actually light up on certain saints and other saints no. They have certain vulnerabilities that are exposed by that saint. That charism is the charism that God is, that they need to overcome the evil one. Because all liberation, at the end of the day, even cases of possession where there is need for the institutional church to assist, all liberation at one level is self-liberation. You have to be the one that says Dominus. You have to be the one that says, I want to be free. And so, so when we see saints show up like Saint Benedict, we know that there's probably curses involved. Whenever Saint Joseph shows up, who's very powerful, terror of demons, there's something in the familial construct. There's some sort of wound or abuse in the breakdown in the paternal construct. Whenever Saint Teresa of Avila shows up, this person needs to start working on a deeper prayer life. Whenever vulnerability to the mystics, the stigmatists, which is common, there's a call for more redemptive suffering. So when Saint Rita of Cashel shows up or Padre Pio shows up, it's because the demon is reacting and showing a vulnerability, right? Jesse, when you were a fighter, we were both boxers, right? If you hit a guy and he went like this, nah, it didn't hurt, and he laughs at you, what did it mean?
He was hurt. You flopped good.
It hurts. It means you got him. Never, ever have I been punched and said that didn't hurt, and it didn't hurt. It hurts. And so the demon is showing these vulnerabilities specifically, and that's part of the beauty of the church, that God will send help from the mystical body on these particular cases. And
that's what Protestants lack, by the way.
Yeah. Again, it's a collapsed, it's a minimalist ecclesiology. And it's a minimalist practice, and so that works itself into praxis. So it's through the full richness of the church, and the full weaponry, the full armaments, the full empowerment through the weapons of the church is what we're going to find liberation. Because look, let's face it. I quoted Chesty Puller in my other book. We might have even put it in this one. Chesty Puller, famous Marine, was asked, "What's the situation?" He says, "We're surrounded." That simplifies the problem. No matter which direction we shoot, we hit one.
Right.
It's a great day to be a Marine. So we're surrounded. We've been airdropped behind enemy lines, and so we have to learn how to use these weapons, including the totus Christus, the total Christ.
Sure.
The church triumphant, the church militant, the church suffering together, waging battle.
Well, I'll tell you, I wish we had hours to go. We have a couple minutes left, just maybe give you guys the last word as far as, like you mentioned earlier, this new, the podcast, new apostolate, anything you guys have coming up, and we can have you back on in the future to maybe talk about that, but maybe share a little bit of that, with folks. I've got links below for the book and other things for folks to check out, but maybe just share that just in closing.
Yeah. Dan and myself, we're on the verge of opening up an online spiritual warfare school. January 2026. It's going to be called the Holy League Institute, where instead of just spending time answering people's questions on emails that constantly come in, Dan probably gets hundreds of a year, and I get hundreds of years as well. Instead of doing that, which takes up a lot of our time, we want to just open an online school to teach people three things basically: interiority, how to shore up their interior life, number one. Number two, what does a spiritual life look like? We're talking about a life of prayer, a sacramental life, a life of devotion, a life of Bible reading. So we want to shore up their spiritual church life. Then we also want to help them with their basic spiritual warfare needs. There's some are so simple as Jess, Dan, what's wrong with praying the Ouija board? I mean, those are some of the type of simple questions that we get constantly. Jess, Dan, what's wrong with going to a seance? And so Catholics lack a basic understanding of spiritual warfare. So this online spiritual warfare school that we plan on opening up January 2026 is going to be called Holy League Institute. It's going to be an international school where we're going to try to help out our priests who are being overwhelmed in parishes. And we're going to try to just field some of the basic questions for people that really want to get close to God and become holy.
Wonderful. Well, I just made a note here. I'll have to check in depending on when people are watching this. But I'll maybe check in with you guys around Lent. Maybe a little couple months in, see how it's going. Maybe have you back on to
it'd be great. We'll send a link. We'll send a link, and it'd be great to kind of invite people over again. Jesse and I, from the beginning, when I re-engaged with Jess, we're in this thing for souls and not sales. If you write a book, you're not going to make as a Catholic writer, you're not going to make a living. And if you write that book and split the royalties, you're really not going to make a living. So any royalty check that I get a royalty check, and I'm like, hey, that's a decent check. And I go into the garage and I realize I got an invoice for at least that much. So multiple times I've got a royalty check, and then I get an invoice from the publisher, and the invoice is always higher than the royalty check. So when I preface it with that, when I say get this book for yourselves, get this book for your parish priest, because the parish priest, a lot of our priests are good men, but they're not getting real good formation in spiritual combat and have to pick it up on their own. And so sometimes they're getting stuff that is more Protestant, and they're fighting from a positionality that isn't as powerful as it is when they're fighting from that position of that sacerdotal ontological reality of priest in persona Christi. He is standing in the person of Christ. So we have two chapters of questions from answering questions from priests. How can priests use this to increase to both provide and protect their parish? I've had feedback just in the last 2 weeks from priests in the field said, hey, I read the book and I did what you said. I started binding the demon before Mass. Any demon that's going to come here and try to block the parishioners from people from coming to Mass or from receiving the graces that God wants them to receive this day. And the feedback is always the same. I started doing this prayer. I bind any demon that's going to block the graces that God wants them to receive from Holy Mass, Holy Sacrifice of the Mass today. And here's the feedback. Father, your preaching is unbelievable. I don't know what's going on with your preaching, but it's unbelievable. I mean, you're on fire. And he's like, hey, my preaching is just the same as it's always been. Or doing binding prayers before the confessional. I bind any demon that would block anyone from coming to make and blocking the memory of anyone from making a good and holy confession, receive all the graces of reconciliation you want them to receive today. Again, the report, you won't believe it. The line is out the door. The quality and quantity of confessions are incredible just by doing these simple binding prayers. The angels go where they're asked. The demon goes where he's not resisted. So when a priest offers that resistance in the cosmic realm, the darkness starts to loosen and souls start to become converted and healed and reconciled. And so get a copy of this for your parish priest. And I think Jesse and I will get 45 cents a piece or something if you buy this book. If we're lucky.
Let's see if we can bring that up. So
yeah. No, I'm not knocking it. Like I said, I'm very pleased with Tan Books, and it's just the nature of it. I'm plugging it not to try to sell books. I'm plugging it because I think there's a lot of good information in there for the average parish priest that really could use this. And I've had priests tell me, since following what you and Jesse are doing on War College, me and some of my buddies, we quietly listen to your show. We don't talk about it when we're at the chancery, but man, putting this into practice, I'm coming alive. I feel like energized as a priest for the first time in 30 years as a priest. I'm starting to light it up. Guys are priests are really starting to enjoy engaging. Now they're learning how to engage in combat. The first time, I had some relatives from Italy relatives of my wife from Italy, and I put and they've never shot a weapon before, and I have a Henry 44 lever action, and this kid hits a lever and he shoots it, boom! It's a big 44 Magnum lever action Henry rifle, right? Heavy, American made, and it blasts his shoulder back, and it blows the target. We had some tannerite on the other side, blew the target up, and he looks at me, and I said, "Son, that feeling, what you're getting right now, is called testosterone." So just love it. And so when a priest starts to do this, he starts lighting up the cosmos like with a Henry 44 big boy. Boom! He starts to light up, and he starts to he recognizes I have something I can still do. I can really do combat now.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, we're Tan Books is a good friend, and we're happy to have you guys as friends of the show here as well. So just Dr. Dan Schneider, Jesse Romero, thank you both for coming on, sharing all this, and we'll definitely have you back.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mike. Appreciate you having us on.
Thanks, Mike. Keep up the good work.
God bless you too. What an awesome opportunity to be able to speak with these gentlemen. And I say this all the time, and when I'm talking to family and friends about this particular ministry, I never stop marveling at the fact that I get to do this, that I can work from my home here to produce these interviews, have these conversations. I find them incredibly spiritually and intellectually enriching, and I know that a lot of you do as well. So please, again, make sure you like this video. Please share it far and wide. Let's get that view count up so people out there can have access to this wonderful information, and of course the book as well. So share that link below for the wonderful book here that Dan and Jesse have put together, Spiritual Warfare Q&A from Tan Books. Make sure you get a copy, and until next time, don't forget to wonder. Take care.